their concerns with the deal. In that meeting was House Majority Whip and Democratic Congressman from South Carolina, James Clyburn. Thanks for joining me tonight, Congressman. Congressman, you were in the meeting with the Vice President, with the Democrats in the House. How did that meeting go?
It was a very good meeting, I thought. The Vice President laid out exactly what they did and why they did it. The caucus listened. There were a lot of questions, and of course I left before the meeting concluded because I had to go to the White House for the signing of the Native American Black Farmers Bill.
Congratulations on that bill passage, Mr. Clyburn. I know how important it is to you and what an important ultimate justice has been achieved in that.
Thank you.
And we've covered that on this show, and I'm glad to see it got there. Now, isn't the reason that we're having this discussion now is that you in the House leadership and the Senate leadership and at the White House made a giant tactical mistake in not voting on tax rates early in this Congress. You were elected to the Congress just in time to cast one of your early votes for the Clinton tax increase, a very significant increase in 1993. But Bill Clinton and you in the Congress were smart enough to get that vote done as one of the first votes, not to let it wait until an election year. Waiting for a tax vote in an election year is politically impossible. And isn't that why you're stuck in this spot, that Nancy Pelosi, Harry Reid, and the President made the mistake of allowing this to go into the election year?
Well, you know, if you go back and look, I think the House passed a lot of things. We passed tax cuts that never passed the Senate. So I think it's a bit unfair for us to keep saying Nancy Pelosi this and Nancy Pelosi that. We passed these things in the House that never got passed in the Senate. So let's be fair when we say exactly what the problem was. The problem was always, can we get 60 votes in the Senate? Our caucus on a lot of things said we're willing to vote for this if we can have some assurances that this thing will be taken up by the Senate or passed by the Senate. And when you couldn't get the 60 votes to even get the thing discussed in the Senate, our caucus had real problems with that, and that's what was causing the pressure on our side of the Capitol, not anything else.
Do you think it's fair to blame Barack Obama, as so many have been doing this week? All the blame for having to settle for this compromise with Republicans is being visited upon the President of the United States. None of it is being visited upon Nancy Pelosi or Harry Reid or anyone else involved in making the decision about when to vote on the tax rates, and Democrats have in fact chosen their weakest possible time to vote on tax rates.
Well, let me tell you something. I have no idea when all this was done, but on Sunday I was on a conference call, stepped out of the sanctuary of my home church down in Charleston, went into the pastor's study, spent an hour and 15 minutes on the phone with my caucus, the caucus's leadership. Nancy Pelosi was on that call. We talked about a lot of things. I never heard one discussion about a $5 million inheritance tax exemption or a $10 million. No discussion about dropping the rate from 45% down to 35%. My question is, when did that occur? It certainly didn't happen while we were discussing it on Sunday, but all of a sudden I wake up Monday morning and that's what I'm hearing. So something happened somewhere, and unless some of the leadership in my caucus is not being fair and square with me, that discussion was never had by us. I'm being told that this came into the bill or the proposal by two members of the Senate and never was discussed by the House. So unless Nancy Pelosi was in discussions nobody else was in, how could I blame her?
Well, what I'm talking about is why this wasn't scheduled last year, never mind earlier in 2010, as a vote in the House and in the Senate. But let's move beyond that. There has been much discussion in the last couple of days of abandoning the president's agreement, of standing and fighting. One senator has threatened, I think falsely, a phony threat to a Democrat to filibuster this in the Senate. I don't believe that'll happen. You have correctly identified that the problem has always been 60 60 votes in the Senate. And we showed on Saturday that there were exactly 53 votes in the Senate for the president's position. So realism going forward from the 53 votes in the Senate for the president's position tells us that there's going to have to be a compromise to get to 60. Are you willing to allow the Bush rates to expire and on January 1st allow taxes to increase in order to continue the fight into 2011 when the Republicans will control the House of Representatives? There are many liberals who've been on this network and elsewhere who are advocating exactly that strategy.
Well, let me tell you this. I don't think that that has to be the case. We can do what we've got now. We can let it expire. But I think that there are areas in between that could be explored. I'll just mention one to you. Why don't we put the bill on the floor? Why don't they go to the Rules Committee, allow certain amendments to take place, and let us put an amendment up to drop that 5 million down to 3.5, that 10 down to 7. Let's do that and then go forward with it. So I'm perfectly willing to vote on all of this, but I also believe that we ought to have room for modifications, for amendments to be made, and let's have some discussions. There may be a little bit of wisdom among us in the House that nobody has even considered yet.
Congressman Clyburn, I'm sure we're going to see some input from the House and some wiggle room in the Senate. There will be surely some amendments, some refinements of this bill as it moves toward what I think is going to be inevitable passage. And I want you to come back to join us as we see that process develop. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Congressman.